Welcome to Haunted Talks, the official podcast of The Haunted Walk, offering thematic walking tours in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, Ontario. My name is Jim Dean. I am the creative director of the company, and I really appreciate you joining us for today's episode.
A plague on both your houses!
Curses have been a part of human history for a very long time, at least 4,000 years. The epic tale of Gilgamesh is a poem from ancient Mesopotamia that is often regarded as the earliest surviving great work of literature and dates to around 2100 BC. In the poem, the gods curse Gilgamesh's friend, Enkidu, with a fatal disease as punishment for his transgressions against the gods. Since then, references to curses have been found on historical artifacts, in a variety of religious texts, and still exists in various elements of our pop culture today, largely in the form of superstitions. The groom cannot see the bride on the wedding day before the ceremony, or the union will suffer misfortune. We avoid walking under ladders and throw salt over our shoulders to avoid bad luck. Knock on wood. Generally speaking, there are two kinds of curses. The first would be the purposeful kind. For example, an Egyptian artifact that was found at a former temple site proclaims a curse on anyone who tries to misuse or repurpose the land. These curses are like threats or warnings. If you do X, you will suffer Y, and Y is often very unpleasant. We will explore some more intriguing examples of these kinds of curses a little later in the show. The second kind of curse is related to an object or person that for reasons unknown seems inexplicably tied to misfortune or tragedy. One of my favorite curses of this kind relates to my namesake, James Dean, and in particular the car he was driving at the time of his death. But before we get to that, our 2017 Halloween season has officially begun and will run right through to November 4th. It is our longest Halloween season and busiest that we have ever offered, so we are very excited around the Haunted Walk, special events taking place in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto. And to see the full descriptions, I'd encourage you to visit our website, which is hauntedwalk.com. You can see all the different Halloween fun we're going to get up to. But I would like to make a couple quick recommendations for you to consider as you're filling out your Halloween calendar. For the first time ever, we are offering premium versions of our tours on select Fridays and Saturdays throughout the month. Generally speaking, these premium versions will be the last tours of the evening when our haunted locations get nice and quiet. And the tours will also be a little bit longer than the standard tours, giving you a little bit more time to explore some of these haunted locations. There's also going to be other content and activities we don't normally have time to do. Perhaps my favorite part about these tours is the maximum group size is going to be 13, which certainly plays nicely into the topic of today's show. But with only 13 people, this is going to be a small group experience, and I don't think you're going to want to miss these. In Ottawa, we have a premium version of our Ghosts and Gallows Are You Afraid of the Dark tour, which leads you through the old Carleton County Jail in near darkness. In Toronto, we have a premium version of our Haunted Walk experience at Black Creek Pioneer Village, and when that place gets very quiet, it gets extremely spooky, and we've had a lot of activity there, so that one definitely worth checking out. And then in Kingston, on Friday the 13th, we're going to be offering a premium version of our original Haunted Walk, so all the classic ghost stories from Kingston, but the tour is going to conclude with a visit to Skeleton Park, Kingston's infamous hidden burial ground. So you're going to want to check those premium tours out. We really do have something for anyone's Halloween taste. Multiple ghost tours in each city. Also in Ottawa, we have our Incident at the Bunker, a zombie adventure where we filled the Diefenbunker, Canada's Cold War Museum, with around 50 to 60 zombies for you to try to navigate your way through, dropping you right in the middle of your own zombie film. In Ottawa, we also have Stranger Tales, a Haunted Walk City adventure, which will lead you on a self-directed mystery where you'll interact with the characters, have to solve puzzles and clues, and eventually end up inside one of Ottawa's most haunted buildings. And that really only scratches the surface of what we're doing, so please go over to our website, hauntedwalk.com, and check out what we're doing for the 2017 Halloween season. In researching curses, something that has become very clear to me is that the curses themselves are very dependent upon the time and place from which they emerge. So perhaps it should be no surprise to us that in Canada, one of our best known curses is intimately connected to hockey, which for all purposes we can consider Canada's national sport, and the tragically hip, who we might consider Canada's band. If you've heard the hip song 50 Mission Cap, you roughly know the story of Bill Barilko. But there's quite a bit more to it than Gord Downie and friends had time to fit in the song. In 1951, Bill Barilko scored the game-winning goal in Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals against the Montreal Canadiens, as Gord Downie says, winning the Leafs the cup. Later that summer, Barilko made the fateful decision to go on a fishing trip. He was visiting his family in Timmins, where he grew up, and accepted a last-minute invitation from a friend and local dentist, Henry Hudson, to fly to Rupert House on James Bay in northern Quebec. They were scheduled to leave on Friday, August 24th, and would return on the Sunday. Barilko's mother was insistent that her son not go. This is for two reasons. 5 years earlier, her husband, Barilko's father, had died on a Friday, and since that time, she believed that Fridays were cursed, and always urged Bill not to put himself at risk in any way, and she certainly considered flying a small plane into James Bay to be risky. The other reason was that she had a premonition that something would happen, and she begged her son not to take the trip. She was in fact so mad with him that she refused to kiss him goodbye. The two men headed out on the Friday morning in Hudson's single-engine Fairchild 24 and were last seen refueling at Rupert House on their way home late Sunday afternoon. They never arrived. A huge search was undertaken to try to find Barilko in the plane, but nothing was discovered despite one of the most costly searches in Canadian history. For the next 11 years, the disappearance of Bill Barilko remained a mystery. And if you're a fan of the Tragically Hip song, you know, the Leafs also did not win another Stanley Cup until his body was discovered in 1962. Now, at first blush, you might think, well, finding the body broke the curse. But the timing doesn't quite work out that way. In fact, Barilko's body was discovered just a few weeks after the Leafs had already won. The Fairchild 24 was found partially submerged in a swamp, wings torn off, and cabin partially burned. Two skeletons were still strapped in their seats, and investigators determined that Barilko and Hudson were killed on impact. The Leafs went on to win 3 more Stanley Cups in the 60s, 63, 64, and 67, seemingly to indicate that the curse had been broken. However, since then, they have not won another Stanley Cup. A drought of about 50 years, and the longest such drought in the NHL today. Sports in particular seems a really fertile ground for curses, and there's a few more I just have to share, both from baseball. After their 1908 World Series win, the Chicago Cubs didn't reach the World Series again until 1945. Now, during Game 4 against the Detroit Tigers, the owner of the Billy Goat Tavern arrived at Wrigley Field with his trusty mascot, a goat. It is said that the Cubs owner, Philip K. Wrigley, sent the man and his goat packing due to fans' complaints about the odor. Legend has it, as a result, the man placed a curse on the Chicago Cubs. Fast forward to 2003 in the National League Championship Series, the Cubs were a mere 5 outs away from going to the World Series when one of their own fans reached out into the playing field to catch a foul ball. According to many Cubs fans, this crucial missed out was the catalyst to their loss that season. The Cubs went on to lose that game and then went on to lose Game 7. However, the Cubs did manage to return to the championship finals again in 2015, and in 2016, they actually won the World Series, completely exorcising their demons and breaking the 108-year curse. The last curse I'd like to mention from the sporting world has to do with the curse of the Bambino, a nickname given to Babe Ruth, one of baseball's most iconic players ever. Originally, he had been a member of the Boston Red Sox, and the team had been very successful at that time. But the decision was made to sell Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees, and Ruth went on to become the home run champion, a record that stood for decades. After the sale, the Red Sox went for decades without a title, as the New York Yankees became the most powerful sports organization in North America. Now, talk of the curse was really an ongoing phenomena in Boston until 2004, when the Red Sox came back from being down 3-0 in the American League Championship against the hated New York Yankees, and went on to sweep the St. Louis Cardinals to win the 2004 World Series. The curse has been such a part of Boston culture that when a reverse curve road sign was graffitied to read, "Reverse the Curse." Then after the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004, the graffiti was edited to read, "Curse Reversed," in celebration. Another arena where curses seem to flourish is in the music industry. And in particular, there is a belief that an inordinate number of young, talented musicians die, often tragically, at the age of 27. Now, this curse seems to trace back to Robert Johnson. In the 1920s, Robert Johnson was an aspiring musician. He wanted to play the blues. The trouble was, by all accounts, he had no talent. So, he did what any of us would do. He took his guitar and headed to the crossroads at midnight for a meeting with the devil. At which point, the devil offers to tune his guitar in exchange for his soul. An offer to which Johnson agrees. The next time he is seen, he suddenly has this musical ability and talent that before had been totally lacking. Now, even though Johnson only went on to record about 29-30 songs, he did go on to influence huge figures in rock and roll history, such as Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, Brian Jones, and many others. Without Johnson and his incredible blues ability, we probably would not have rock and roll today. Johnson goes on to die at the age of 27, and according to the most popular theory, Johnson was murdered by the jealous husband of a woman with whom he had flirted. A revenge tale, if you will. And his death is described as being very painful and violent, as if someone had been poisoned. Witnesses reported that he died in a convulsive state of severe pain. While Johnson could be the first member of the 27 Club, he certainly has not been the last. Other superstar members of the 27 Club include Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Kurt Cobain, and Amy Winehouse, all of them dying under very tragic circumstances. Whenever I've heard of the 27 Club, I've always been interested in the science to back it up. A study published in the British Medical Journal in December 2011 concluded that there was no increased risk of death for musicians at the age of 27. Although the sampled musicians faced an increasing risk of death in their mid-20s and 30s, this was not limited to the age of 27. A 2015 article in The Independent also provided statistical evidence that popular musicians are not more likely to die at that magical age. Which is interesting. The first study did find there is a bit of an increased likelihood during that general age, late 20s to mid 30s, but not specifically to 27. On September 30th, 1955, actor James Dean was driving his brand new Porsche 550 Spider, which he had nicknamed Little Bastard in a mocking tribute to a studio executive who had been known to refer to Dean with that moniker. He was driving the car to an auto rally in Salinas, California, when he was involved in a head-on collision with a 1950 Ford Tudor. He He was a mere 24 years old and died in the crash. While Dean is considered a tragic Hollywood legend today, at the time of his death, only one of his films, East of Eden, had been released. After the significant news coverage of the accident of this young, handsome actor who died in a tragic high-speed crash, his second film to be released, Rebel Without a Cause, propelled him into cult status.
You know what kind of drunken brawls those parties turn into. It's no place for kids.
A minute ago, you said you didn't care if he drinks.
He said a little drink.
You're tearing me apart!
What?
You say one thing, he says another, and everybody changes back again!
He became frozen in time as a talented, misunderstood, and rebellious youth, and certainly remains a symbol of teenage angst even today. He remains the only actor to ever twice be nominated for an Academy Award following his death, receiving nominations for his roles in East of Eden and his final film, Giant. Dean was an avid car racer and had recently won several races and was eager to establish himself as a serious driver rather than some kind of Hollywood tourist. To that end, he wanted a faster and more powerful car and settled on the Porsche 550, a very limited edition and powerful machine. At the time he bought the Porsche, he also bought a station wagon and trailer on which he would transport the car to the races. However, for the trip up to Salinas, the decision was made that Dean should drive the Porsche to give him some more time behind the wheel, as he had only gotten the car very recently. On that fateful day, Dean was pulled over and ticketed by the California Highway Patrol for going 65 miles per hour in a 55 zone. In kilometers, he was going about 105 kilometers per hour in an 85 kilometer zone. Certainly an ominous omen of what was to come. Just over an hour later, as the caravan continued down the road, Dean suddenly accelerated, quickly leaving the station wagon and trailer in his dust. At approximately 5:15, a 1950 Ford Tudor, driven by Donald Turnipseed, that's his actual name and seems fitting for a story about a curse, crossed over the center line as he was making a turn. Dean, who was driving at a reported speed of about 137 kilometers per hour or 85 miles per hour, apparently tried to steer the Spider in a sidestepping racing maneuver, but with insufficient time and space, the two cars crashed almost head-on. A witness reportedly saw the Spider smash into the ground 2 or 3 times in cartwheels and landing in a gully beside the shoulder of the road. Dean's passenger was thrown from the Porsche, while Dean himself was trapped in the car and sustained numerous fatal injuries, including a broken neck. The accident was witnessed by a number of passers-by who stopped to help. A woman with nursing experience attended to Dean and detected a weak pulse, but the nearest hospital was quite a distance away, and Dean was pronounced dead on arrival at 6:20 p.m. Within about a year after Dean's crash, his Porsche was involved, at least loosely, in 2 more fatal accidents and 2 other injuries after hot rod designer George Barris purchased the car. While getting a tune-up, Little Bastard fell on a mechanic's legs and broke them. 2 doctors supposedly purchased the engine and transmission from the car, of whom one was killed and the other seriously injured in subsequent car accidents. Someone else, who had purchased the tires, had them blow out simultaneously, sending the driver to the hospital. From there, the reports get a little more muddled. We know that the car's shell disappeared sometime before 1960 while on an exhibition circuit. According to some, a truck carrying it crashed, killing the driver, and the car was gone by the time the authorities arrived on the scene. By other accounts, it was merely stolen en route. If we look critically at the curse of Dean's car, we might see a similarity between the deaths of the young musicians in the 27 Club. It makes me wonder if these kinds of curses are in some way a coping mechanism for us. When a famous young person, seemingly full of potential, is suddenly taken from us, we need some way to come to terms with it. Our own mortality being reflected back to us in our best and our brightest of our young people. Like with many curses, the more of an effort you make to find hard evidence supporting the curse and the events that are attributed to them, the more you will be disappointed. In this case, the majority of the stories about the Porsche were spread by George Barris, who bought the wreck, Many believe these stories were fabrications by Barris to improve his standing in Hollywood by being connected to not only a very well-known tragic event, but also to James Dean. Barris did go on to become fairly famous for his car designs, including designing the original 1960s Batmobile, which Adam West drives, and he built many cars for Hollywood celebrities over the years.
To the Batmobile. Let's go.
What might lead some credence to the belief that Barris's stories about the Porsche maybe shouldn't be trusted have to do with a controversy surrounding the Back to the Future trilogy. Over a decade after the release of Back to the Future 3, one of the DeLorean time machine stunt cars used in the film was sent to Barris for restoration purposes, to be eventually put on display at the Peterson Auto Museum in Los Angeles. The car was returned to Universal Studios in 2003. Barris later purchased a stock DeLorean and converted it into a replica of the Back to the Future car, which he used to promote himself and his company. While Barris never officially stated that he had anything to do with the Back to the Future films, he did like to indulge in stating that he had built a Back to the Future DeLorean, but never disclosed it was a replica car. In 2007, Universal Studios sent Barris a cease and desist order, demanding that he never again make misrepresentations regarding any involvement with the Back to the Future films. They called upon Barris to remove images of the flying DeLorean from his company's website. Back to the Future writer-producer Bob Gale went on the record stating that George Barris had absolutely nothing to do with the design or construction of the DeLorean time travel vehicle. Two other well-known curses that don't seem to stand up to much scrutiny are the Curse of Tutankhamen and the Curse of the Hope Diamond. Late in 1922, the British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Pharaoh Tutankhamen, who had died in 1323 BC, around the age of 18. When they entered the burial chamber, they found the young pharaoh's mummified body and a wealth of religious objects, wall painting, and inscriptions, as well as equipment or items he would need for his journey into the afterlife. The discovery created a worldwide press sensation, which sold a lot of newspapers, and stories spread about a curse on anyone who dared to break into a pharaoh's tomb. It was not long before a key member of the team died in Cairo at the age of 56, and at that same moment, as the story goes, the lights in Cairo went out. This set off a frenzy of speculation. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, best known for writing the Sherlock Holmes books, and also someone who had a deep interest in the supernatural, told the American press that an evil elemental spirit created by priests to protect the mummy could have caused the man's death. And this setup of a curse to follow anyone who disturbs a tomb or a gravesite has been used countless times in horror fiction and films. Over the years, quite a few other members of Carter's team, and later visitors to the site, died in tragic or mysterious circumstances. However, there are several important facts that are often omitted when the curse is discussed. There was no indication on or in the tomb itself of any kind of curse. Skeptics have also pointed out that many others who visited the tomb or helped discover it lived long and healthy lives. A study showed that of the 58 people who were present when the tomb and sarcophagus were opened, only 8 of them died within 12 years. All the others were still alive, including Howard Carter, the man who led the expedition, who died of lymphoma in 1939 at the age of 64. The last survivor, an American archaeologist, died in 1961, a full 39 years after the event took place. A similar historical object that is long believed to be cursed and is visited by thousands of people each day is the Hope Diamond. French merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernet, according to legend, stole a 115-carat blue diamond from the eye of a Hindu idol in India. Now, the Hope Diamond has recently been insured for about $250 million, to give you a sense of how big of a gem this is. Now, for his sacrilege, the story goes, Tavernet was supposedly mauled to death by dogs. But in reality, he sold the gem to King Louis XIV of France and retired a wealthy man. All went well until the diamond fell into the hands of King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette, who of course were beheaded during the French Revolution. And if you're interested more in their story, we do cover them quite a bit in episode 21, Versailles is Haunted. After Lord Francis Hope of England inherited the diamond, he married an American showgirl. The pair squandered their fortune, sold the diamond, and were eventually reduced to poverty. After, Evelyn Walsh McLean bought the stone in 1912. Her son was killed in a car accident, her daughter committed suicide, and her husband left her for another woman. Eventually, he ended up in an insane asylum. Now, while this on its surface sounds like a very compelling list of misfortune to fall those who have owned the Hope Diamond, I would encourage you just to jump on Wikipedia and check out the page about the Hope Diamond, which shows all the different owners and the fates they met. If you were to take all the names and labels off this document and just see these people who lived and died over these set periods of time and how they met their demise ultimately, I don't think you would immediately jump to a curse. Many of them still lived long lives to a ripe old age. The Smithsonian Museum of Natural History bought the Hope Diamond in 1958, and really no one there has suffered any consequence from the museum owning it. And as the diamond is viewed by thousands of people each day, there has been no significant reports of any fallout for the visitors as well. After researching these stories, I find myself quite skeptical to think these curses have some type of supernatural cause. There's just so little first-hand primary evidence about these things that have happened, and so much hearsay, conjecture, or straight-up lies that they seem like good stories more than any type of historical fact. It very much reminded me of a conversation I had with Professor David J. Hand, a statistician, who I had on episode 12. We're talking about his book, Why Coincidence, Miracles, and Rare Events Happen Every Day. In some ways, curses are kind of the flip side to that. Now, in that episode, I asked Professor Hand if he could give us a bit of a checklist anytime we're faced with what we perceive to be a very unique, unusual, rare circumstance that we're involved in. And I think we can apply some of his thoughts to the topic of curses.
What one needs to do is to recognize that there are all sorts of other things that have happened during the day or during the week, which haven't been coincidences. And so you haven't noticed them. They haven't been forced into your consciousness. They've just gone on and they're just sort of normal events. Just by chance, occasionally, this sort of thing happens. And when it happens, wow, you think your attention is drawn to it. You notice it. And so really, what this is an illustration of, that life is full of buzzing events, all sorts of things happening one after the other. But when something like that comes to our attention, it forces itself in our minds, and we notice. It's not magical in the sense of mysticism or anything like that. It's to be expected that some of these things should happen just by chance occasionally.
While Professor Hand's comments in some ways make me even more skeptical of any type of supernatural element being connected to curses, I do need to make a confession. And that is, I've recorded this episode over the past 2 days. Usually I do it all at once, but with our Halloween season starting this week, there's been a lot of other priorities to attend to as well. So I've recorded this episode over 2 days. I noticed, after doing my first recording session, I looked up and found there was a hornet on the ceiling directly above my head. Now, I'm not used to seeing too many hornets here, so that seemed quite unusual. There were no windows or anything open, and it did kind of twig in my mind, is there a possibility that I could become cursed for doing an episode on curses? The following day, 2 other interesting things happened. After finishing the second recording session, or essentially right now as I look up, there are now 2 hornets right above my head on the ceiling. And I must admit, it's kind of spooked me. The other thing that happened yesterday in Ottawa, where I'm recording the show, is there was a freak storm, almost a mini tornado by some accounts, that ripped out a considerable amount of trees in the city's west end. And again, I kind of started to feel guilty. Could I, in some way, be responsible for this? To play it safe, even though I'm not sure I believe in this either, I think I'm going to burn some sage once the episode is all finished and wrapped to try to protect myself as much as possible. And I find it intriguing, even knowing all the information and all the reasons why perhaps curses should not be believed or participated in. As human beings, I think it's just hard for us to take that chance. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode and you have nothing but good luck for listening to it. Please do go over to our website, hauntedwalk.com, and check out all of the Halloween fun we have going on. If you haven't been on a tour with us this year, the Halloween season is a perfect time to do so, running through to November 4th. And if you've been on a couple tours already this year, we do have a lot of special events going on that you're not going to want to miss. So hauntedwalk.com for all the information about our Halloween season. And I also encourage you to follow us on social media. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, all at Haunted Walk. A special thank you this week to all of our amazing tour guides in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto. The Halloween season is quite busy for us, and I just want to say how much we appreciate how hard our guides work to provide extraordinary experiences every evening. As always, thanks to Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com for the additional music. Until we meet again, sweet dreams.